Ahead of the midterms, major Republican commentators predicted a red wave could happen if candidates focused on tough-on-crime messaging. In September, 29% of Republican campaign advertisements mentioned the word crime, claiming criminal justice reform and less policing in progressive cities has caused an increase in violence. Despite the predicted success of these tactics, Democratic candidates that were targeted in Republican ads for being soft on crime, like John Fetterman, they actually won their races.
Joining us now to discuss is host of A Fresh Perspective and contributor to Red State and Liberty Nation, Jeff Charles, and political journalist Rebecca Azor. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So let me start with you, Jeff, because I know you and I talked about this a lot. You wrote about it for Newsweek. What happened? You know, we were so sure that the crime wave was going to favor the Republicans, and that just doesn't seem to have materialized. Talk us through what happened.
No, it didn't materialize. But here's the thing. I mean, the issue of crime was a winning issue for Republicans. So they were right to harp on the policies that contributed to the issues that we're seeing as far as crime goes over the past couple of years. But Republicans made the same mistake that they make on almost every other issue in every other election. Very good at complaining about what Democrats are doing, not very good about offering an alternative. See, they were right when they were talking about how these soft on crime policies only protect criminals and they don't protect civilians. But Republicans never said, hey, you know, that plan isn't good, but this is what we've got going on. Here's how we're going to solve the problem. Republicans haven't realized that if there's a problem and Democrats put forth a faulty solution and Republicans don't put forth a solution, that problem still exists. So this whole crime issue is kind of just a microcosm of the overall election where Republicans failed to make their case.
Yeah, what do you think, Rebecca? Is this a message for the Democrats that really what they're doing is effective, despite Republican complaints about how their policies on this issue? What are Democrats going to take as a lesson from this?
Well, I think the focus being on crime and not actually getting the message across to me correctly was what was the issue for Republicans. It's just like putting out, to me, misinformation, the ads and everything associated with that. Democrats, to me, I feel like in this moment, they can focus, when they do focus on crime, it's more specifics. While I think that both parties can do better in, explaining their cases, pushing information with stats and things like that, Democrats, I think in this particular portion of it, when it comes to crime, it's just they were lucky. I think for when it comes to this. When it comes to this topic, they could have done more as well, I believe, but I don't really think it was anything that was so spectacular that made Democrats have to look at it and think, oh, we won in this particular case. Both parties could have done better, but Republicans were pushing, to me, this one saying crime, focusing on such a small portion of it, not really having any details. I just think it didn't work in their favor, for sure.
So interestingly, even though we're talking about how the Democrats, in a way kind of won more than we were expecting, New York City Mayor Eric Adams blamed New York Democrats for having poor performance in the midterms on the state's bail laws in New York, saying, quote, everyday New Yorkers, particularly in the inner city, they don't want these repeated offenders. This catch, repeat, and release system is just destroying the foundation of our country. We are losing the base, Black and brown people who really believe in those basic things.
According to a Pew Research poll, 82% of Black Democratic voters said that crime was very important to their midterm vote, compared to only 33% of white Democrats. I don't know, what do you make of that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, who have been the disproportionate victims of these high crime rates? It's been Black Americans. And a lot of Democrats, like Governor Kathy Hochul is one of them, dismissed those concerns. So it wasn't surprising to me to find out that Black people in America cite crime as one of their highest priorities. But again, I mean, Eric Adams is right. I mean, Eric Adams got elected because of a law and order platform. But if he's locking people up and they're being let out on this bail system, then it kind of defeats the purpose. But again, I'm going to go back to Republicans because yeah, I don't agree with the progressive version of bail reform. I think it protects criminals, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an issue with our bail system. Where are the Republicans saying, okay, that plan sucks, but here's how we're going to address the issue and solve the problem? They're nowhere to be found. They're very good at complaining, but when it comes to providing actual solutions to provide an alternative to the American people, they have been lacking. I mean, these midterms were the Republicans to lose, and they did. I know they're probably going to get the House, but this is not a victory. So Republicans need to take a step back and really start to understand where they're going wrong and how they can improve their messaging.
Yeah, I mean, the New York Post had a piece about how in New York specifically, it was black voters that put Hochul over the edge over Zeldin, that they felt that Zeldin was just too Trumpy. He was too Trump-aligned, and there was just no way that they were going to show up for somebody like that. Rebecca, I'm wondering, are we in a situation again where it doesn't seem like either party is focused on the needs of the black community?
I mean, I would say, that if we look who is more focused on the needs of the black community, what's harming the black community at a disproportionate rate, we can automatically say it's the Democrats. I wouldn't say it's the Republicans, especially when it comes to the idea of crime. I think even with that, they're pushing that in New York, Mayor Eric Adams, where's Olay when I need her? But she, she talks about this often here on this platform about, his push about crime and how much crime is happening there, how to put more police on the streets and funding them more to be on the streets. If police equaled more safety, then New York would be safe as hell right now, but they're not. It's not an area where I think he pushes crime and the over exaggeration on crime. That is apparent. However, I do think Democrats, if it came to it, are the ones, even though I don't think they're doing enough, they're the ones that actually have more of a focus on the needs of the black people.
No, I hear that. I mean, I have mixed feelings, admittedly, on this issue because I see the kind of problems in many of our cities, not all of them, but many of them with homeless people and suffering mental illness issues and the violence and the threats to people, the random beatings and stabbings and carjackings, et cetera. And I want to do something about that. Obviously, something should be done about that. But then I don't know whether, you can't. It's hard to just detain people before they've been convicted of some crime. Some of these are mental illness problems. And can we keep people in facilities? We don't have the right facilities for them. And then I don't, as a libertarian, I don't love the idea of throwing more and more money into policing, which can have these ancillary effects on police brutality and things like that. That said, we might need it in some cases. I don't know. It's a very frustrating kind of mixed bag for me. That's my perspective. I don't know, Jeff. How would you advise the GOP to talk about this from now on, given that they fell short on a tough on crime message, even though there really is, I think, an underlying issues that need to be addressed?
I think that there's a holistic messaging reform that the GOP needs. I mean, New York City has the most police officers, and compared to other cities, New York City actually isn't as bad when it comes to crime, but it's still an issue. But I mean, we can't just say, just throwing more police at the situation is going to solve the problem. I mean, I might get in trouble with some conservatives here, but the progressives do have some good ideas when it comes to addressing these issues without necessarily throwing somebody in a cage. I mean, if they're nonviolent or if they're dealing with drugs, there might be other solutions to that. But the bottom line is that you can't have policies that protect criminals more than civilians. And I do think Democrats have been better at talking about these things and about addressing them. I don't think that they've been good about solving the problem, but they're at least willing to discuss it. Whereas on the right, we're just law and order, law and order, law and order. Okay, well, what's that going to look like? What does that look like for officers who abuse their authority? Does law and order apply to them? It should. So I think that Republicans can win on the crime issue because the competition isn't that great, but we have to fight strategically and fight wisely instead of just saying crime is a bad thing. I mean, anybody can say that.
If law and order means we have more police like we had in Uvalde, then what good is that going to do?
Precisely. Exactly.
All right, Jeff, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more Rising in just a minute. Stay tuned.